Something just killed my dog.
Something killed your dog?
My dog went flying through the air over the tree, and I don't know how it did it.
Okay.
Deep in Bigfoot territory. Episode 34, Mica Mountain in British Columbia. This is a Squatch Mafia documentary. Welcome to this episode of Bigfoot territory. Today we are going to journey into the heart of British Columbia, into the Canadian Rocky Mountains, and take a closer look at the history of Bigfoot at Mica Mountain and in the wider region. We will be listening to numerous historic accounts and stories, and take a look at photos and videos of Bigfoot from the area. And we will take a deep dive into one of the most famous modern-day Bigfoot sightings ever, the 1955 encounter of William Rowe at Mica Mountain. Mica Mountain, one of the peaks of the Canadian Rockies, has a height of nearly 9,400 feet and is situated 25 miles west of the border of British Columbia and Alberta. The area is notorious in Bigfoot lore, with the first stories documented by Western explorers and ethnographers dating back to the 1890s at least. In October 1955, one of the best-known historic Bigfoot sightings occurred at the slopes of Mica Mountain, when a man named William Rowe claimed he saw a partly human and partly animal creature while hiking in the wilderness. He swore an affidavit in 1957 that the creature was about 6 feet tall and covered in brown, silver-tipped hair, with thick arms reaching down to its knees, broad feet and breasts. The ape-like sighting of William Rowe marks a change from earlier Bigfoot accounts in British Columbia, which repeatedly described Bigfoot as a giant-sized Indian, and is often quoted as the birth of modern Bigfoot descriptions, though that name wouldn't emerge for another year. Before the William Rowe encounter, the Sasquatch were often understood as a tribe or a race of native giants, not too distinguished from humans, a description that mostly stems from the stories of the First Nations. After the William Rowe encounter, with its pronounced gorilla-like depiction, the public image of the Sasquatch turned more into that of a giant ape or a gorilla. Mica Mountain, in the Canadian Rockies, is situated near Fraser River Valley, Harrison Lake, and other well-known Bigfoot hotspots in the heart of British Columbia. At the eastern edge of the Premier Range, which is a subset of the Caribou Mountains, Mica Mountain has an elevation of 2,855 meters, or 9,400 feet. In good weather, the view from the summit includes Kinbasket Lake and Mount Robson, which is the highest summit in the Canadian Rocky Mountains, with an elevation of nearly 13,000 feet. The name Mica Mountain refers to the mica that was mined from the higher slopes of the peak in the early 1900s. Mica Mountain is located in a subarctic climate zone with cold, snowy winters and mild summers. Temperatures in winter can drop below -20 degrees Celsius. In the valley below, the McLennan River becomes part of the Fraser River. The area includes Mount Robson Provincial Park, nearly 900 square miles of protected area around Mount Robson. The park was established in 1913 and is part of the UNESCO World Heritage Site. The lower elevations of the area are covered with mountain forests of Douglas fir and black spruce. Moose inhabit the areas around the swamps and lakes, while white-tailed deer and black bears live in the forests. At higher elevations above the tree line and in rocky regions, woodland caribou, grizzly bears, mountain goats, and bighorn sheep are found. Rearguard Falls serve as the final destination for many salmon during their 1,200-kilometer journey through the Fraser River to their spawning grounds in the fall. The Shuswap people, a First Nation tribe belonging to the Salish, are the earliest known inhabitants of the area. They speak one of the Salishan languages and traditionally depended on hunting, trading, and fishing to support their communities. Their traditional homeland stretches from the Rocky Mountains in the east to the Fraser River in the west, and from the Columbia River Valley north to the Caribou region. From historic times to today, the area is notorious for Bigfoot sightings. The first stories documented by Westerners, which speak of mountain giants and wild men in the region, date back to the 1890s. In his 1892 book, Notes on the Shuswap People of British Columbia, the great Canadian geologist Dr. George Mercer Dawson wrote, "The Shuswap, aver that unknown beings sometimes throw stones at them in the wilderness, particularly at night, when stones may be noticed occasionally falling into the fire." The Shuswap avoided the regions in the forests and mountains they believed to be the home of these mysterious beings. The first account that was more detailed came from the Scottish-Canadian ethnographer James Tate, who worked with interior Salish communities in the late 1800s and early 1900s. In his publications, The Thompson Indians of British Columbia from 1900 and in The Shuswap from 1909, he included numerous native stories of giants or wild people living apart from human communities, mostly in caves or mountains in the remote wilderness. These figures were known under various names in different languages. The Shuswap believed that these beings were something between a human and an animal, and Tate noted that the Shuswap mostly considered it dangerous or taboo to speak of them openly. He wrote that these giants were sometimes described as a different race of people, but larger and wilder than humans, and fully covered with hair. These giants were so powerful that they hunted large game by running them down and strangling them or breaking their necks. They were also said to steal and carry off children or women if they strayed too far from camp. According to the Shuswap, these creatures live in remote places, mostly in the deep forests or caves in the mountains, and usually avoid human settlements. Tate also notes that other tribes in the region believed in wild giants, known to leave large footprints in the wilderness. Some of their stories also warn that these beings could take children or raid caches of dried salmon or roots. The early Bigfoot researchers, like René de Hinden and John Green, later documented dozens of encounter stories from loggers and hikers in the region. In November 1951, for example, a prospector from Kitchener, Ontario, told René de Hinden of a disturbing experience he had near the village of McBride, which lies on the western shores of the Fraser River, about 40 miles downriver of the ghost town of Tate John Cache. The man told de Hinden that his prospecting camp was raided and totally destroyed by a mysterious being that had not only helped himself to a half-eaten mountain goat, which the prospector had suspended from a tree, but also left behind barefoot human-like footprints in the snow around the camp, measuring 15 to 16 inches in length. But the most famous Bigfoot encounter story from the region is the 1955 encounter of William Rowe on Mica Mountain, a classic of modern-day Bigfoot lore. In October of 1955, William Rowe, a highway worker and experienced outdoorsman, was spending time near Mica Mountain. Rowe was part of a crew working on a road in the area. He found himself with a day off and decided to take a hike and scout out a good area for a future hunt. Rowe carried his rifle but was not really looking to take a shot that day. He decided to visit a rugged and isolated area on the mountain where there was an old abandoned mine. Rowe had taken a grizzly bear in this area the year before. The encounter of William Rowe is especially remarkable because of the detailed description and primatological accuracy, especially considering that the encounter happened in 1955, and other descriptions of the Sasquatch by Westerners were extremely rare and not widespread. Rowe, an experienced hunter and outdoorsman, spotted a strange creature that was totally shocking and unknown to him. Before primatology was even a word, he described a sagittal crest, large trapezius muscles, small ears, flat face, long arms, and many other details. On August 27, 1957, he signed an affidavit filed on his experience. The affidavit was drawn up by the legal department of the city of Edmonton. The affidavit was in response to a request from John Green, who had asked Rowe if he would agree to make an account of his sighting while under oath. What follows is the complete affidavit of William Rowe made before the city of Edmonton in August of 1957, as it was printed in Ivan T. Sanderson's classic book, Abominable Snowmen, Legend Come to Life. Exhibit A. Ever since I was a small boy back in the forest of Michigan, I have studied the lives and habits of wild animals. Later, when I supported my family in northern Alberta by hunting and trapping, I spent many hours just observing the wild things. They fascinated me. But the most incredible experience I ever had with a wild creature occurred near a little town called Tate Jean Cache in British Columbia, about 80 miles west of Jasper, Alberta. I had been working on the highway near Tate Jean Cache for about 2 years. In October 1955, I decided to climb 5 miles up Mica mountain to an old deserted mine, just for something to do. I came in sight of the mine about 3 o'clock in the afternoon after an easy climb. I had just come out of a patch of low brush into a clearing when I saw what I thought was a grizzly bear in the bush on the other side. I had shot a grizzly near that spot the year before. This one was only about 75 yards away, but I didn't want to shoot it, for I had no way of getting it out. So I sat down on a small rock and watched, my rifle in my hands. I could see part of the animal's head and the top of one shoulder. A moment later it raised up and stepped out into the opening. Then I saw it was not a bear. This, to the best of my recollection, is what the creature looked like, and how it acted as it came across the clearing directly toward me. My first impression was of a huge man, about 6 feet tall, almost 3 feet wide, and probably weighing somewhere near 300 pounds. It was covered from head to foot with dark brown silver-tipped hair. But as it came closer, I saw by its breasts that it was female. And yet, its torso was not curved like a female's. Its broad frame was straight from shoulder to hip. Its arms were much thicker than a man's arms, and longer, reaching almost to its knees. Its feet were broader proportionately than a man's, about 5 inches wide at the front, and tapering to much thinner heels. When it walked, it placed the heel of its foot down first, and I could see the gray-brown skin or hide on the soles of its feet. It came to the edge of the bush I was hiding in, within 20 feet of me, and squatted down on its haunches. Reaching out its hands, it pulled the branches of bushes toward it and stripped the leaves with its teeth. Its lips curled flexibly around the leaves as it ate. I was close enough to see that its teeth were white and even. The shape of this creature's head somewhat resembled a Negro's. The head was higher at the back than at the front. The nose was broad and flat. The lips and chin protruded farther than its nose. But the hair that covered it, leaving bare only the parts of its face around the mouth, nose, and ears, made it resemble an animal as much as a human. None of this hair, even on the back of its head, was longer than an inch, and that on its face was much shorter. Its ears were shaped like a human's ears, but its eyes were small and black like a bear's, and its neck also was unhuman, thicker and shorter than any man's I had ever seen. As I watched this creature, I wondered if some movie company was making a film at this place, and that what I saw was an actor, made up to look partly human and partly animal. But as I observed it more, I decided it would be impossible to fake such a specimen. Anyway, I learned later there was no such company near that area. Nor in fact did anyone live up Mica Mountain, according to the people who lived in Tate Jean Cache. Finally, the wild thing must have got my scent, for it looked directly at me through an opening in the brush. A look of amazement crossed its face. It looked so comical at the moment I had to grin. Still in a crouched position, it backed up 3 or 4 short steps, then straightened up to its full height and started to walk rapidly back the way it had come. For a moment, it watched me over its shoulder as it went, not exactly afraid, but as though it wanted no contact with anything strange. The thought came to me that if I shot it, I would possibly have a specimen of great interest to scientists the world over. I had heard stories of the Sasquatch, the giant hairy Indians that live in the legends of British Columbia Indians, and also many claim, are still in fact alive today. Maybe this was a Sasquatch, I told myself. I leveled my rifle. The creature was still walking rapidly away, again turning its head to look in my direction. I lowered the rifle. Although I have called the creature it, I felt now that it was a human being, and I knew I would never forgive myself if I killed it. Just as it came to the other patch of brush, it threw its head back and made a peculiar noise that seemed to be half laugh and half language, and which I can only describe as a kind of a whinny. Then it walked from the small brush into a stand of lodgepole pine. I stepped out into the opening and looked across a small ridge just beyond the pine to see if I could see it again. It came out on the ridge a couple of 100 yards away from me, tipped its head back again, and again emitted the only sound I had heard it make. But what this half laugh, half language was meant to convey, I do not know. It disappeared then, and I never saw it again. Whether this was a Sasquatch, I do not know. It will always remain a mystery to me, unless another one is found. I hereby declare the above statement to be in every part true, to the best of my powers of observation and recollection. Signed, William Rowe. In 1957, the Vancouver Province, a British Columbia newspaper, published an article on the encounter, entitled "Hunter Spots Sasquatch Girl." The description given by Rowe in this article reads as follows. It was about 6 feet tall, with a complete, well-proportioned female figure, and must have weighed about 300 pounds. From head to toe it was covered with fur. It walked absolutely upright, and I couldn't help but notice the strange feet. They were about 18 inches long, narrow at the heel, like the average foot, but widened out to about 6 inches at the toes. Her hands were perfectly formed, except much larger than the average person. The ends of her fingernails were broken and chipped, and they were not claws, they were fingernails. She had a wide, flat nose, shiny black eyes, slightly smaller than a person's, and had a short, thick neck. Her mouth was unusually wide. Her complete body was covered with hair about half an inch long. She walked almost directly towards me, then stopped beside some small shrubs about 10 feet away and squatted down to eat. I remained absolutely still and watched. The fur around her mouth was all green from the leaves and vegetation she had eaten. Her teeth were pure white, which probably indicates she was in the prime of her life. And they were just a little larger than average teeth. She had no tusks. Myrtle Walton, Rowe's now deceased daughter, was responsible for the profile drawing of what was seen on Mica Mountain. She was featured in the 1972 documentary, Bigfoot, Man or Beast. She and her husband spoke of their own sightings and her father's sighting. The drawing and how it was made was covered too. Here is an excerpt of her interview from Bigfoot, Man or Beast. Join Squatch Mafia at Patreon to watch the entire documentary.
As John Green and others began to seriously investigate reported sightings, they found that many aspects of the sightings were the same. One of the first detailed drawings of a Sasquatch was made by Mrs. Myrtle Walton of British Columbia. Her father, William Rowe, had the unique experience of being able to watch a Sasquatch at close range. Mrs. Walton now tells us how it came about.
My dad come and asked me to draw a picture of this animal or human for him. He called it a Sasquatch, so he could send it to this John Green, and I drawed the picture for him, and just exactly the way he told me he wanted it drawn. There was a few things he changed on it, like he made the arms a lot heavier, and the head was different, and the breast was different, and the back part was different. So between the two of us, we patched it all up and we sent it to John Green.
A few years after Mrs. Walton made the sketch for her father, she and her husband had a personal experience with a Bigfoot. This is what they report.
Well, I think my wife and I have heard the Sasquatch. There's a swamp fairly close to the house here where we can walk out of an evening, and quite often we go down to watch moose. And one night we were down there, and there wasn't any moose around, which was strange because in the summer every night there's moose in the swamp. And it was just before dusk when across the swamp we heard this screaming cry.
There were 3 cries, screams, or horrible screams, or whatever there was. One after the other. There was silence between, and everything was just dead quiet afterwards. Just made the hair crawl on the back of your neck.
We didn't see anything, but I've heard every animal that lives in the locality at different times, and it wasn't any of those. And if I was asked to describe the sound, I'd say it was a kind of a screaming cry, and it seemed to have anguish in it. Anguish was the thing that stuck with me.
Here is an approximation to the sound that they reported hearing that evening.
The physical description given by William Rowe of the creature he observed back in 1955 is one that has held up and been repeated time and time again by alleged Bigfoot witnesses all over North America. The crested head, thick, non-tapering torso, incredibly broad shoulders, abnormally long arm proportions, wide feet and more continue to be described by witnesses today. Most of these people have never heard of William Rowe. These similarities, reported over many decades, would seem to indicate that people are seeing real flesh and blood animals that belong to the same species. The credibility of William Rowe has never really been criticized. There are no information that would lead to believe he might have been some sort of charlatan or hoaxer. Also, all of this took place almost 3 full years before the term Bigfoot was used in a newspaper article describing prints found by Jerry Crew in Northern California, and 12 years before the Patterson-Gimlin footage became an international lightning rod. Rowe did some interviews regarding his sighting, but later took the additional step of having a sworn affidavit drawn up, detailing his experience for John Green. He simply did not have to do this. This is not the sort of action a hoaxer would take. Over the decades, the Bigfoot encounter of William Rowe became one of the classics in Bigfoot lore, and it is one of the earliest sightings known. It has been researched and documented in books by many of the great Bigfoot researchers and cryptozoologists, such as John Green, Ivan T. Sanderson, Grover Krantz, and others. The area around Mica Mountain and Mount Robson Provincial Park, featuring a lot of famous places in Bigfoot lore like Harrison Lake, the Fraser River Valley, and others, has remained a notorious hotspot for Bigfoot sightings until this day. What is your opinion on the William Rowe encounter story and on the history of Bigfoot at Mica Mountain? Have you witnessed something strange in the region? Let me know in the comments. Hit the like button if you have enjoyed this episode of Bigfoot Territory. Subscribe to the Squatch Mafia channel at YouTube for more videos on Bigfoot and Sasquatch. Check out Squatch Mafia at Patreon and TikTok for extra content. Thank you for watching.